All right. Hello, everyone. This is Daniel Miller at the Spiral Gardens Community Food Security Project. We are live. You might have heard a little beep on my phone because I just got an announcement. We are live. I should probably put this in airplane mode if I can. No, not airplane mode. Do not disturb. There we go. So you guys don't have to hear my notifications on my phone. But welcome to another live online video class today. And today I was going to keep it real simple. Instead of me having a whole project and a whole list of things to talk about, I was hoping to do a live question and answer today where the subject is your questions. Hello, Evelyn. So that you can have a chance from either questions that you just have in general, whether they're based on the previous classes or they're based on your own experience in the gardens, your own successes or problems. Just please bring those to the comments right now in the chat live, and we will discuss them. I also want to, at some point, sooner or later, to show you how things are progressing from the two demonstration plantings that we did in the last two classes. We did a container one and we did a raised bed one. So I'll show you those. I do have two questions to start with that people put into the comments. I put this in a video announcement yesterday and asked people to put some questions in there. Hopefully I'll be able to see comments as they come in here. Generally, I can. So when the first one comes in, you know what? I'm going to do a little test to make sure that I'm seeing them because I don't want to miss any. And I can see it. Excellent. So that checks out. So the first question was actually from my sister, Natalie Dawkins, who lives over in New Jersey. And she said, oh man, I should have written it down, but because I don't know if I remember the exact plant she said, but it was something like she has success growing onions and beets. Hopefully I got that right. And I got the general gestalt of it though, so I should be able to give a good answer. She grows those successfully in her yard, but she doesn't have good luck with eggplant and tomatoes. So, and I think hopefully I got those plants right. I'm realizing now I can't see those here. But it was basically the difference between those two things are, and whichever exact one she said was, what I got from that was that the cool weather crops grow well for her, but the hot weather crops don't. And so that could be, in my experience at least, and all these answers are just going to be from my experience. Folks are welcome to chime in with whatever their experience has been, or if they've heard something that either complements or is a little different than that. That's fine. Just put it all in the comments. We'll have a discussion here. But there's two things that makes me think about. One is, what is the amount of sun and heat that Natalie, my sister's garden space, is getting? If it's not getting a full amount of light, then that means that that would explain why the cool weather crops are doing well in her space and the hot weather crops aren't. So that's one thing. There's a whole list of things that can grow in cool weather for us here in the Bay Area where we don't have a winter frost. That also is the things that we can grow all year round here. So they tend to be leafy vegetables, things in the onion family, peas, hardy perennials, things that live for many years, like a lot of the classic culinary herbs are things that you can grow all year round here. And so those are also, even when grown during the summertime, those are still cool weather crops. They do better in cooler areas or cooler microclimates. Microclimates are, even though there's a climate for the whole city or county or region that you're in, there's the microclimate of your yard, your specific space, wherever you're growing. And that has to do with the amount of sun it gets. It has to do with how much wind it gets. And whether there's things that might magnify the heat, like a wall that reflects the heat, or a pond that light can reflect off of, whether there's a windbreak, and so on and so forth, can affect the microclimate of the spot you're in. So, and a lot of times cool weather crops are grown in different regions, even in the same area, that are cooler. Like if you ever drive up Highway 1 up the peninsula, you'll see that along the coast there are where they're growing farms where they're growing artichokes and greens and things that are the cool weather crops, because in that coastal environment near us, those things grow better. And then more inland, at least in the California example, in the Central Valley, is where more of the hot season stuff, the tomatoes, the peppers, the hot season stuff can be kind of loosely defined as the vegetables that make seeds, the fruits that we call vegetables. So those would be like peppers, tomatoes, eggplants, squashes. All those things want a good amount of heat. And so for us in California, that would be the Central Valley. So getting back to Natalie's question, what amount of light and heat is your garden plot getting? And that could be the reason why your eggplants and tomatoes aren't doing well and your cooler season crops are doing well. So that's answer number one. Answer number two is that eggplants and tomatoes both are much more demanding for nutrients. They need more fertilizing in order to do well. They're heavy feeders, whereas the other things you mentioned, the onions and the beets, aren't as heavy feeders. They don't mind fertility in the soil, but they're not as demanding of it. They're not as big of plants. They don't suck nutrients out of the soil on the same level. So it might be also or the amount of nutrients in your soil and how you're preparing your soil. So are you adding a good amount of compost? Are you adding additional fertilizers? We talked about fertility, nutrients and fertility in the second class about 3-4 classes ago. So definitely you should go back to that and check that out. So yeah, those are two possible reasons why your beets and your onions could be doing well at the same time that your eggplants and tomatoes aren't doing as well. So hopefully that helps. You know how to reach me if you have more questions. So that was question number one I got. Definitely, folks, this is your chance for Q&A. That's what we're doing today. So hopefully more folks will put in more questions, or if they want to offer advice as well, please put those in the comments as we go along, and put your questions in, and we'll spend some time talking about them and have a discussion. I had a second question that was put in by Omar Dawkins. That's my sister Natalie's husband, my brother-in-law. He asked, what are good crops for indoor winter gardens? So there's a couple different levels to that one. It depends on what your indoor garden situation looks like, right? Do you have like a full greenhouse where it's holding the heat and getting the sun all day long? Or is it a window? I assume it's, for you guys, that it's your apartment window. And what is the situation in that window? Is it south facing? Does it get full sun all day? Which direction a window faces will have a lot of effect on how much light it gets and whether it's blocked by other buildings or trees. But vegetables, food crops do need light, some amount of light. They're not like houseplants where they can just live off of indirect light. Now, every plant needs some light. They all live off of photosynthesis. And so they're using the energy from light, primarily from the sun. You can have artificial lights that substitute for that to some extent, but they need that light in order to create sugars inside themselves. They use it as an energy source combined with water and carbon dioxide. So that light has to happen on some level. Now, what we normally call houseplants are generally, not in every case, but are generally understory rainforest plants. And they're suited for in our houses because, one, the temperature is very similar to in their natural environment is very similar to how we keep our houses. So about 70 degrees, depending on how much you want to spend on your heating bill, depending on where you live. Though 70, 60 degrees is also the temperature that they're from, and also since they are understory plants in their natural environment, they don't get full sun there. So they're only getting the light that indirectly filters through the rainforest canopies. So both of those things together make them really suited as houseplants for us and can go inside even if they're not directly getting sun from a window. As long as they're getting some indirect light in there, then they can generally do all right. Now, vegetables, food that we grow to eat, generally is not in that category. Most of those, they have varying amounts of light they need, but they do need direct light to some portion of the day. So you can go anywhere from like lettuces that would need the least, you could probably might be able to get away with like 4 hours a day with those, to hot season crops, the ones that want a good amount of light, tomatoes, peppers, and so on. Those are going to need at least like 6 to 8 hours a day of direct light, and they'd prefer more. Now, so if you have a south-facing window, that's when you're going to generally, at least here up in the northern hemisphere of the planet, that is where the sun comes from, is the south. If you're in the southern hemisphere, of course, it's opposite. I don't know how many Australians, South Africans, and people from Chile we have watching this broadcast right now. But for this upper half of the planet, I guess it's not really up or down, but northern, the sun generally comes, not generally, but does come from the south. If you have a west or an east-facing window, then those will also get a fair amount of light for a portion of the day. If it faces north, you're going to have a very difficult time getting enough light to grow food through your window. Now, in any of these cases, you can supplement with artificial light, and there's a lot of grow lights you can get nowadays. Generally, folks haven't used them for growing vegetables, but that doesn't mean you can't. So, and they're getting more energy efficient. There are, instead of just like incandescent bulbs for that kind of thing nowadays, you can also get different fluorescent bulbs for it. And then I believe, I actually haven't seen this, but I've heard, I think that there's actually LED indoor grow lights, which would use far less power. That it wouldn't be economically viable to supplement indoor light with an incandescent bulb. You could probably get away with the fluorescent bulb, and if you can get a decent LED grow light, then that would be way more efficient and way less of a carbon footprint. So you can use that to supplement the light for growing stuff indoors. So depending on all those factors I just talked about, that determines what you can grow inside. And so if you have a window that gets decent light, then you can grow what's in season at the time, right? So Omar's in New Jersey, so it's going to be freezing outside, but I'm assuming you're going to get the same amount of sunlight as us overall, and you're going to be heating inside your house, keep it at a decent temperature. So, you'd probably be able to grow what we can grow through the winter here, which is leafy stuff, lettuces, greens, onion family stuff, peas, herbs. You should be able to get away with all of that. Now, some people do manage to grow hot season stuff through the winter, and that takes generally a real greenhouse environment that can hold heat and probably supplemental light from artificial sources, because not only do these plants need a good amount of light, but they can be sensitive to the number of hours of light in a day. And if that's too short, as days are short in the winter, the plant will be confused why they're growing at that point. Now, some of these things, like peppers and tomatoes, actually are perennials in the tropics. They will grow the year round. Perennial, again, means the ability to grow many years. It's defined as 3 or more. So some people do manage to get away with growing peppers, tomatoes, and other things, hot season plants, indoors through the winter, but it takes a good amount of light through your window or whatever your sunroom situation is, and probably some artificial light to fill out the day to 16 hours of light a day, and allow them to do more photosynthesis. So hopefully that's a pretty good answer. And one other piece of it, though, is that there are challenges to growing indoors. One of the biggest challenges is pests, because in an outdoor environment, the things that are pests, the things that are eating your plants, tend to have predators that would eat them. And we've talked a lot about creating sort of that polyculture that encourages the predators of your pests, the pests on your pests, to be present and in good numbers, and to help keep your pest numbers down. Now, in an indoor environment, there's no limit. So if you get a pest in there, your chances are you're not going to have things eating them. So you can get exponential population growth of mites, of aphids, of whiteflies, and stuff like that. So if you are growing food indoors any time of year, but particularly in the winter, you're probably going to be needing to do some regular pest control on them. You can wait until you see the pest problem, but you're going to need to be doing soap sprays or neem or pyrethrins, which are insecticide that's taken from chrysanthemums, or some sort of organic pesticide. You'll probably need to do somewhat regularly. And these are all harmless to us. You may want to take them outside on your patio to spray, so you don't overspray in your house. But that's something to keep in mind, is that you will have more pest problems inside, and you can get like molds and rots if there's not enough air circulation, if the plants aren't getting enough light, if they're unhealthy from being in the indoor situation. You can get issues. So I'm not saying it can't be done. There's a lot of people who do it, but there's just more factors to it than growing outside. And if you are in New Jersey like Omar, you don't really have any options to grow outside during that time. So yeah, and I would say just give it a try, and just be prepared that you may be some trial and error, and that's fine. And as long as you keep learning from that, figuring out what went wrong, what went right, and keep working with that, then you're sure to succeed. So those are the 2 questions I have so far. I definitely was taking a risk with this one, seeing if people would put more questions in the comments. So this is your time to do that. If you have questions or advice or anything you want to offer around gardening, please go ahead and put that in chat now. And in the meantime, I'm going to take you on a little tour. Since I don't have any more questions to answer right now, I'm going to take you on a little tour of what we did the last 2 classes, so you guys can see the progress. I want to do this each time so you guys can see what's happened and not just see the initial planting. So I'm going to try this. I'm going to turn the camera around. I'm going to pick up this tripod entirely. And JJ has one. Awesome. Please put it in there. So 2 classes ago, we planted a container, a 25-gallon container, which is quite large, and did this whole planting with the trellis behind it. And we put them in as baby starts. And as you can see, if you've been following along, they have grown quite a bit. So, okay, yeah, I will definitely get to that, JJ. So, yeah, if there's more to it, if you have more questions, please put them in. And if anybody else has any questions, please go ahead and do them. And then in the meantime, I'm just going to finish this little tour of the stuff we planted, and then I'll get back to all the comments, questions. So in here, the foundation planting is going to be these dino kales. There's 1, 2, 3, looking through the lens, 4 right there. And those are going to be the biggest plants in the end and take up this whole thing. But in the meantime, we have these gailan, which are Chinese broccoli. They're a fast-growing green, kind of like a broccoli stem with a little mini floret on it. And those are growing really fast, just as expected. So they're going to use the space in between the dino kale while the dino kale gets going. And then pretty soon, we're going to harvest all of those out. Hey, Natalie, I saw you just come in. I answered your question in the beginning. If you didn't watch it, you can go back later in the VOD. And I answered both you and Omar's question at length. So hopefully, let me know if that answered you guys' questions. So the Chinese broccoli are growing fast, which is great. And so we'll see how long it actually takes for them to come to harvest and then clear them out and leave the space for the dino kale. But right now things are going as planned. The cilantro is getting some size, and that also is sort of a temporary crop between the dino kales. And as it goes to seed, it's also going to provide flowers that feed pollinators and attract beneficial insects. And then in the back here, you can see that the peas are putting on some size too. They've put on at least 1 inch, 2 inches. They haven't quite reached the top of the trellis here. They got a little ways to go, or actually, I mean the bottom of the trellis. I should have probably put this a little lower, but I think they'll make it up there. I can always hang some strings down if they need, but I'll be keeping an eye on them, and when they get big enough, they'll make it up here to this thing, and hopefully by the end of the winter, they'll be climbing all the way up this whole trellis, and we'll be harvesting tons of peas. Yeah, and the garlic is hanging out. The chives are hanging out. They don't look like they've done much. The thyme looks like it's taken hold. Got a little weed here. Not too many weeds in here because we used all fresh soil. But hopefully, it's not a problem. We'll have to just keep an eye on that. But yeah, things are progressing there. So let's see. Let's switch this around again. And then let's take a little walk over here down to the other bed we've planted. And we'll look at that. If anybody else has questions they want to put in that we'll talk about next, please do it. And then as soon as we finish looking at this other bed, we'll talk about those. All right, so let me switch this around again. And the days are getting short here. We've already lost the sun back behind our little houseplant greenhouse. But hopefully you guys seen that. The camera will adjust for it. So this bed right here, we planted the last class. We spent some time clearing it out, and there was a bunch of useful stuff in it that we harvested and pulled out. A lot of medicinal herbs that had volunteered, and some of the perennial foods. And then we finished harvesting our peppers and arugula. We trimmed up our green onions over here and took some of those. So I told you what I was going to plant, but oh, hello, nephews and nieces, how are you? So I told you what I was going to plant, but I didn't do the planting on camera, so it was going to take too long. So in this lower tier of it, we did a combination of, here's some arugula right there. We've got these red pak choys that are really cool, very colorful. And then, excuse me, we've got some baby gem lettuces, some mini lettuce heads. So again, as in these plantings, those are a bit overplanted, but some of them are going to be done before others. And as they crowd each other, we're going to take some of it out and leave room for the other things. So maybe that will be the pak choy first. Maybe it will be some of the arugula, the mini gems. We'll see how that goes. There might be space to overplant it even more. as long as you know you're overplanting and you're harvesting to make room as you need it, then that's fine. And then up here, this is all romaine lettuce. You can see some leaves from the cherry tree above have fallen. That's not a big deal. That's fine. A little mulch is good. Although we will talk about mulch a little bit after this because of JJ's question. One asked what kind of dirt you use. Okay, I'll talk about that in just a second too. So you can see all those are romaine lettuce, and then what you can't see is in between them I actually planted seeds for broccoli rabe. And the broccoli rabe hasn't come up yet, but I have faith that it's going to, and that's going to be my filler to use the space in between so that we're not just have all that space going to waste between those lettuces as they get big. And we'll harvest, even though we can't see the broccoli rabe yet, we'll harvest that first, and then we'll get to harvesting romaine lettuce all winter long. And this one over here, I put some ornamental kales. These guys, so they're edible kales, but they got a lot of color. Stuck another lettuce in there, left some of the celery that had planted itself in there. And then back here I put some of those Portuguese cabbages I was talking about. And then back here we got more peas that are going to go up this trellis, and more Portuguese cabbage over there. And then the rest of it was the stuff that was already in here. We got the peppers that were here from the summer. We're going to take the gamble that they're going to make it through our winter, and left some celery that was here from before. That's more celery and more parsley. And then along the front edge, in these little cinder blocks, I put a lot of beneficial flowers that will help also feed pollinators and attract beneficial insects. I have a couple 6-packs here of stuff I'm going to put in still. That's some older 6-pack of watercress that got a little too rangy to sell, but I'm going to stick them in there. Put some watercress in there, and then I've got some mache. This is a little salad green, another 6-pack that's not really saleable, so I'm just going to stick them in there as well, and keep filling this out, and yeah, have a bunch of food. All right, and JJ asked another question too. All right, that's another mulch question. Cool. So I'll answer first what kind of dirt I used. So in this bed, there was existing soil already, and so I just fed that existing soil. Now I actually brought that soil in. It was a combination of soil from the pots in our nursery, and those had actually gone into our chicken run along with a bunch of weeds and chicken food and mulch, and the chickens had pooped all over it and turned into much richer soil. And then we took it back out of our chicken run and filled the whole bed with it, and that was last year. And then this year, if you watch the class from last week, I added compost and a fish fertilizer to it, to compost to keep the organic material in there, keep the soil nice and dark and healthy, and have good structure and feeding all the microorganisms and critters in it. And the fish fertilizer, just to make sure it was really nitrogen rich. Nitrogen is the operative nutrient fertilizer for making things grow fast, for leaves to be green and to grow fast. So that's what I used in here. And then we'll go back to the other planter I did. That one I filled all with soil that I sell in the nursery here. So that one I partly used some of this stuff. It's just a bagged soil, but it's organic. It's pretty good. It's from a distributor we use called Down to Earth. It's all natural. It's got some beneficial fungi in there and some worm castings and some nutrients. And that's a pretty light soil. And then I mixed it with a heavier bulk soil that we get from a soil company here. And I mixed the two together. But so both of them are just purchased soils, but just from experience, these two I found together give a nice texture. So I I have dump trucks come in and dump it in here. So you can see this stuff. It's got a lot of rock and sand and some fir bark and compost and stuff. So that's like a heavier rocky soil, and then I mixed it with stuff from those bags I showed you over there, and together they're really good. And we at the nursery, we bag that soil up and we sell it in these compost in the green bags and the bulk soil on the white bags. They got a bunch of leaves falling on them right now, so I got to clean those off. So let me go get comfortable again, and we will finish out the rest of these questions. And there's still time to put more questions in. Let's see, let me just go ahead and put this down. I'm losing my son, so we're gonna have to sit in the shade, but I think I'll manage to make it to the end without getting too cold here. Right on. And I am clearly my own cameraman today. So let me see if I can get back to... All right. The rest of the questions. So JJ's is, she said, he or she actually, I've been using straw from Biofuel Oasis as mulch in my raised beds, but I'm finding it kind of a hassle to deal with around seedlings. Also, it's a pain to plant new stuff in the beds or to rejuvenate the soil because I need to remove all the old straw to do so. It's difficult to carefully place around plantings, especially baby seedlings, because it tends to push over and damage them. Is there something you would recommend as a mulch instead? I'll use a drip irrigation under the straw. Side note, I found a couple husks that look like wheat in my last bale. Is that bad news? All right, let me get to the end here. Oh, you knew the chickens help with the fertilizer, huh? Yep. Okay, Jessica. Cool. I was just being careful with the JJ. And then, nowadays, you never know what pronouns people want to use. So, good to meet you, Jessica. So, yeah, so let's answer the question about the mulch. So, we've kind of brushed on this before. Sorry, I'm being finicky about the angle of the camera here. We've brushed on this before of mulch is good for the soil in a lot of ways, and mulch is anything that it doesn't even have to be able to decompose. It's really anything you put on top of the soil. Ideally, it's something that's going to decompose and eventually become part of the soil. The opposite would be like a lot of these front landscapes where the landlord doesn't even want to deal with the yard at all. He'll put like plastic and rocks, right? Technically that's a mulch, but it's not what I'd recommend to make things grow better, right? So in her case, she's using straw, and straw is a great mulch. The thing that makes it great is, one, it's a natural byproduct of growing our food. So when you harvest rice or wheat or oats, any of those, they leave the straw, which is the stems of the plant after you thresh it for the grain. And a farmer could just put those back on the field and put them in. There's natural ways of farming that they do that. Most of them don't. Most of them have these big machines that then come through after the harvest and then turn all the husks into bales, and then they make a second, smaller bit of revenue off of selling those after they've sold the grain. And it doesn't really matter which it is, JJ. It could be oat straw, it could be rice straw, it could be wheat straw. Those are all fine. Sometimes there'll be some amount of seeds left in them that will resprout, and so you'll get kind of grass growing out of the straw mulch. But it's fine. You can just pull those really easily as long as you keep up on it. It is called straw, not hay. Hay is when it's harvested in a more green state and has maybe more seeds on it. And then hay is actually used as animal feed. They feed hay hay is for horses, right? To horses and cows, and they store it over the winter to feed animals when there may not be as much forage out in the grass pastures for them, or for animals that don't get to go out on pasture, which is kind of a shame. So yeah, that's what hay is. Hay will look green to the eye, whereas straw is dry and brown and everything. But anyway, mulch lays on top of the soil, excuse me, and it benefits in a number of ways. For us, it helps in that it suppresses weed growth. If you have enough stuff on top of your growing soil, the weeds won't be able to come up. And anyone who's grown in bare soil, like I just showed you, you know that being clear is just a very temporary situation. There's going to be a bunch of weeds come in there, and you can be diligent and pull the weeds either by hand or with little hose. I like these little handheld Japanese hose that just have these little blades like this, and you can go in there and just between your plants and clean up the things you want. It gets even more difficult if you did what I did and you actually seed things in there, because I'm going to have things I want coming up with weeds in between. And I'm just going to have to be patient and keep it to what I want to grow versus what nature wants to grow. So mulch is good for weed suppression. It's also good for watering less, because there's less evaporation than there is just from bare soil. And then finally, it's good for adding to the soil. Soil likes to be covered. Bare soil in nature is kind of a wound, right? There's very few situations where soil would just be bare. Generally, there'll be things growing on it, and there have been things plants falling and dying on it, leaves and last year's plants and everything. And so there's a natural mulch layer generally in nature. And where that mulch touches the soil, there's decomposition. It's oxalis, right? There's decomposition happening, and that mulch, be it straw or leaves or even like barks and stuff, they will be breaking down into the soil and adding organic material in that interface. They also make it friendly for worms and other creatures that would live in the soil to come up in there and have more of an ecosystem, more of a habitat. And they will also help break the stuff down as it decomposes. And I find, even on bad soil, if you put a nice thick mulch, in permaculture they talk a lot about sheet mulching, where you're putting like greens and manures and cardboard and straw, and you're making this like whole pizza of mulch. When you go underneath one of those, after even 6 months, you'll find all these worm castings, and that it's naturally the soil is in really much better shape, and it even softens the soil underneath without you having to dig it. Now, those are the upsides. The downsides are that you are providing habitat for things, and some of those things will eat your seedlings. So if you have a thick mulch, and it's got to be fairly thick to do any good. Jessica's saying that she still gets oxalis, which is a weed here. It looks a lot like a clover, but it's not. But it has that same kind of clovery leaf. You'll know it if you live around here. It has yellow flowers. You can eat it. It tastes sour. Okay, Natalie has a question about garden lime. We'll talk about that. The chickens love the oxalis. So if your mulch was thicker, you'd probably get less of the oxalis coming through. But that will some of the things that are annoying you will make them probably more annoying. Is one, if you've got this thick mulch and you got to plant a seedling, you got to be able to get it down in there. So when I've gardened in the mulch, I generally have to pull the mulch back and make a space for the seedling to go. If the mulch is going to kind of collapse back over it, sometimes I've taken a piece of cardboard and made like a little ring, something like that, some kind of cardboard tube that will keep the mulch off of the plants. But the other issue, besides just physically getting the seedling down in there, is that, you'll get slugs, earwigs, sow bugs, slugs in particular, that may eat your seedlings while they're young and tender. I remember in the very beginning of Spiral Gardens, we're all like, permaculture, sheet mulch. We sheet mulch this whole lot. And they're like, hey, we didn't have to weed, we didn't have to dig. and then we planted all our seedlings in it like I described. Next morning they were all gone. Just munched by the slugs. So I've been kind of 50-50 about mulch since then, because I know the benefits and I love them, but at the same time, in this climate at least, you can get pest issues from it and just have physical issues planting. There is a solution nowadays for the slugs, which we didn't have 28 years ago when I started this, and that's the product I showed you on the pest and disease workshop a few weeks ago, which is called Sluggo. Sluggo is iron phosphate, which is simple plant nutrients, in a little, I assume, wheat gluten pellet. It looks like Greek orzo, kind of like rice, and it when it gets wet, the slugs eat it, and then they get a permanent stomach ache that kills them. And so with Sluggo nowadays, you sprinkle it around where you plant each of the seedlings right after you water. You could potentially keep the mulch from being a slug habitat. So if I was using straw mulch, I would definitely be using Sluggo. It won't eliminate the earwigs and the pill bugs, the sow bugs, but it will eliminate the slugs. Those are going to be your biggest problem. You could eliminate the earwigs and the sow bugs with another organic pesticide, either chrysanthemum based one, which is pyrethrum. You don't want pyrethroids, those are synthetic versions of them, but if you get just a straight pyrethrin from daisies, which are marketed horticulturally, you could do that. Or there's another organic pesticide called Spinosad, Spinosad, and that is a toxin from a bacteria that is naturally occurring, and they concentrate it and put it in the thing. So you can use organic pesticides in order to stop the mulch from having that downside. Of course, then you are using or pesticides. Oh yeah, that happened to you as well. And there's rats. Rats are another issue. We can talk about rats too. You have indeed started using Sluggo after months of 9 p.m. picking. Didn't really work. Well, if you have a huge bunch of mulch, it may take a while in order, because you have a big population of slugs, so it may take a while to eliminate it, and you may just be able to kind of sprinkle it over the mulch as a whole too. You don't want to use too much of it, of course, because that gets expensive, but it is a possible solution. So organic gardening is always about compromises and checks and balances. It's like mulch is good and has a lot of benefits. It does have some side effects as far as pest issues. You can then do more things to deal with those pest issues, and you just have to decide if that works for you or not. So all within there you can make decisions. You can not use mulch, or you could also use mulch later once the plants have gotten bigger, like start in bare soil as seedlings, let the plants get some size, and then mulch around them when they're going to be less vulnerable to those things, because a little seedling is so tender and you can just take it out, right? But once you got a bigger green or something growing, it's going to be harder to lose them overnight from slugs and snails, and gives you a chance to give them a head start. So that could work as well. Rats are a different issue. I've dealt with them. The city around here is full of them. It doesn't mean anything about you if you have rats, because they're all over the place. A lot of people come in with stories about that, and it's been a problem with humanity since people started making cities. But I've come back to just simple snap traps, of wood snap traps, and it's how I bait them that really makes them work. Is I put some peanut butter on the thing, and then I put a little piece of bacon on top of that, and then I tie the bacon on to the peanut butter, so that when the rat tries to eat it, it can't just slough it off, right? It's going to get caught up in the tied-on bait, and that generally works pretty well. And the bacon addition, apparently, you wouldn't know that they were omnivores like that, but apparently they are. They like that fat and protein, and they can't resist it, just like some people can't resist bacon. And I find when I tie them on like that, I actually get multiple uses. Bacon, right? So the rats do the same thing, and they can smell it from afar. And that works pretty well. And if there's going to be like dogs or cats out there and you're afraid of them getting stuck in the traps, but not sure he's tying them together. Yeah, you got to tie them on with some like thin twine or some thread. And that's what really gets them caught up in there, because they're really good at just eating that bait off of the trap and just leaving you with an empty thing and going, thanks, I'll wait for tomorrow's bait. Peace out. So yeah, if you're worried about cats and dogs, I put a milk crate on top of it, because the rats can get in the handles of the milk crate, and put something heavy on top of that, and that'll make it a little bit more cat safe or dog safe, or kid safe if you have that issue too. So I've done that too. But yeah, it's just a matter of trapping them. And then yeah, if you do have mulch on your garden bed, you do need to pull it off in order to add to the soil. A lot of times though, if you have been doing enough mulch and you're mulching with things more than just like straw or leaves or wood chips, oh yeah, you had a leaf question too, that is going to be feeding the soil. So like in with your straw, you also put a layer of compost and maybe throw some fertilizer on that, and then put another layer of straw on top of that. In that case, you never really need to pull the mulch off again. You just keep adding to it, and you're adding yummy stuff in layers on the mulch. And then a lot of people do no-dig gardens completely with mulch, as long as you can handle the other downsides of it, right? So yeah, and places like where Natalie lives in New Jersey, there's going to be less problems with slugs and insects than we have here, because it freezes in the winter, and those guys get, iced. And there's less of them here, where it's mild all year round. And in the winter especially, it's mild and moist. It's a perfect place for slugs because they never freeze, and it's nice and comfortable for them all year round. So yeah, so it really depends on where you live too, and what kind of pest issues you will have. I can only speak specifically for the Bay Area, because that's where I've been my whole life, and I know it well. As far as leaves falling on the garden, depending on what kind of leaves they are, if you're using mulch, the leaves can be part of that mulch, and they can be very beneficial. They're free mulch. The kind of leaves you don't want on the deer and rabbit, okay. The kind of mulch you don't want, or leaves you don't want, are ones that keep other plants from growing, right? So acacia does that, eucalyptus does that, pine needles to a certain extent can do that. If you see like under the tree like nothing else grows, chances are you have a kind of leaf that, not just from the mulching action, but some leaves have chemicals in them that suppress other things. They kill off their competition like that. So you definitely want to not use those kind of leaves, but other kind of leaves that don't have some kind of, you can usually tell by the smell, don't have a strong chemical deterrent for other plants, then that's just more free mulch, and that's actually really good. Leaf molds are great for the garden. So unless you don't want a mulch at all, then they're good. Yeah, they're very good. Yeah, deer and rabbit are a whole other issue. Deer, the only thing that really works is a fence tall enough to keep them out, which I've heard even a 6-foot fence isn't really enough, that they can leap 6 feet no problem if they're hungry enough. If they're not hungry enough, that's probably enough of a deterrent. And there can be legal limits about how high you build a fence. Of course, there's economic limits too, because it's expensive. Use this really nasty smelling organic spray. Yeah, and that's another thing you can do, is there are deterrents or repellents. Sometimes as far as I know, they're mainly based off urine of predators. I've actually bought some of those, like, it's the funniest thing, off of Amazon. I bought a gallon of coyote piss, right? Not for deer, but I heard it actually kept the rats away, which it didn't work with at all. But it made sense that they would know what, they'd instinctually detect coyotes' urine and get the heck out of there, because that's their natural predator. And one of the reasons there are rats in the city at this point is we don't have coyotes and foxes and bobcats and stuff that would naturally be keeping those things more under control. So yeah, so there's a lot of urine-based repellents that that have been used successfully to keep deer away. But you got to keep that up, and you have to deal with the smell yourself to a certain extent. I've also heard that blood meal, which is used as a nitrogen fertilizer, you can get it in the garden fertilizer department, will repel deer to a certain extent while fertilizing your plants, because it smells like something died there, and they're like, whoa, get me out of here. And the smell doesn't smell as repugnant to me as the coyote urine does. And then Jessica brings up cabbage moss. Yeah, you've been making decoys and also trying shade cloth. What kind of decoys have you been making to do that? I've seen decoys for apple moths, where there's moths that, the famous worm in the apple, which is actually a caterpillar from a moth. And I've seen as pest control for those, hanging these red apple-colored balls from trees and coating them with sticky stuff that the moths will come and think it's an apple, and they'll land on it and get stuck on there. But for the cabbage moths, the moths lay their eggs on the cabbage family plants, and then they become these little green caterpillars that then will devastate your cabbages and anything in that family, which is also kales and collards and a lot of different greens, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli. Those I generally use neem, which is what I also use for aphids. It's the oil from the seed of a tree from India. It's harmless to mammals, but it's bad for insects. Caterpillar still is an insect, even though it doesn't have 6 legs yet. That works pretty well. There's also bacteria that's specific for those caterpillars. It's BT for short, Bacillus thuringiensis, and you can buy that in garden centers as well. You just got to be careful not to spray it on habitat for the butterflies that we like, which are generally the colorful ones that don't eat our plants. So you make sure you just keep it on your cabbage family plants and don't overspray onto your milkweeds and your passion flowers and your fennel and your other stuff that the other caterpillars would like. Apparently they are territorial, so they don't bother plants if they think there's already someone there. Interesting. Printouts of pretend moss, and I hang them from string. Wow, that's really interesting. I learned something there. I wonder. Yeah, it will work. You have to spray it directly on them while they're there. Or if it's still there to some extent and they eat it, I think it will still get them as well. I didn't know that thing. So she's hanging pictures of, they're not moths, even though they look like moths. Technically they're butterflies. And I just have to say that because I have a lot of butterfly friends who get mad at me if I don't represent. But yeah, she's hanging pictures of these white cabbage butterflies, and the other ones won't come. Wow. All right, I will have to look into that. See, that's when you get really clever, is if you can figure out their behavior and don't even have to spray anything. That's really interesting. Yeah, you use neem for powdery mildew, but didn't realize you can use it. Yeah, you have a separate bee and butterfly attracting garden of flowers. Very nice. Yeah, so that's really good for the bees and the butterflies and the pollinators, making sure they have a chance because they're having a hard time lately. And it's also good if it's near your food plants. It will attract the beneficial insects that will eat the bad bugs on your vegetable garden. And it's not 100%, but it can really help. JJ, thank you for that link. I will definitely look that up. Cabbage butterfly decoy. Awesome. Well, folks, we're hitting the hour, and thank you. You all managed to fill this up with questions and comments and some really interesting information. So I'm going to look that up. I was taking a bit of a risk since these broadcasts are new. whether there be enough questions coming in to fill the hour, but we did it. I also talk a long time, so that helps a lot. But I want to keep doing this. We're approaching our winter break here, so I'm probably going to do one or two more of these, and then I'm going to take a little break because we shut down for December, and then we have more limited hours in January. I'm not going to go too long of a break of this because I want to keep that continuity of this as a regular thing, and it's that which is going to make it a thing and have more people watching. And the whole goal is because, well, obviously because of COVID, we can't do classes like we used to, but at the same time, we've experienced about 5 times more people from our experience here are planting food gardens right now because they have the ability to do it. They're home, and it makes sense for a number of reasons besides the fact that they're home and they're in their yards more. So we really want to support that because it's been our mission here for the whole time Spiral Gardens has been going. And it's a lot of Kindred Spirits mission too, to really facilitate more people growing food in their yards and feeding themselves and providing, a more decentralized food system, and you're supplementing your own diet. It's good for your mental health. It's good for your physical health. And you may not be able to grow, most people aren't going to be able to grow enough food to entirely feed themselves, but the stuff you are growing is way more nutritionally dense, especially if you're growing it well, than anything you're going to be able to get. You're not going to be able to get anything fresher. You have a connection with that food. You knew exactly where it comes from. And it usually takes some hard times in our industrialized society before people start doing this again. The last time there was a really big push for it was World War II, when there was the whole victory garden movement, and there was breakdown of supply lines at food at home, and so they were doing propaganda, social messaging on the government level, trying to get people to grow food, everybody to grow food in their yards. Well, that's not the only time that was appropriate. And, there's a lot of questions with the industrial food system. And if nothing else, it's good for people to at least remember to know how to grow food, even if they're only growing a little bit, or if they're only doing it as a little side hobby or whatever, because at least that knowledge stays in our society. It's not forgotten. The only reason I'm necessary is because a lot of people haven't grown food in, a generation got skipped, a generation or two, and we're just trying to help be one part of bridging that generational gap of people growing their own food. Oh, you also emailed about volunteering during the week. Hope to hear back. Yeah, so right now we are out here. Our schedule got a little reduced. We're usually Tuesday through Sunday. Volunteering was happening Tuesday through Friday. We've one less day, so Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday just show up at this point between noon and 5 because we only have 2 weeks left. We're going to be open for November, and then December we're going to shut down, at least from the front. There'll still be some stuff going on behind the scenes, but probably the first couple weeks of December I'm just going to take a vacation. But so yeah, get in here while it's still November, noon to 5, Wednesday through Friday. Just come to the front gate over there and just go, hey. So one of us should be in here during those hours. We may be here more than that, although after 5 it's dark and cold now. So, but I may be in here earlier than that. But those are safe hours to show up and just help out. So I'd love to meet you. Stop by. During the COVID thing, we've had a whole sign-up thing just to make sure that there weren't too many people coming at once, because we got to have enough space for, safe distancing. But at this point, it's slowed down enough. There was one volunteer who came while I was doing this class today. It slowed down enough. I'm not worried about it being overcrowded, and we want to get you in before that. And we'll have some limited hours again. In January, maybe in December, depends on what happens going on with our staffing. February, we're going to hit the ground running full force again and have our full hours. But yeah, hopefully I will see you and get to meet you in person. And anybody else who's watching this and want to come help, please do. We're going to do this again next week. I don't know exactly what the subject is going to be, but again, If you have questions that you'd like to talk about, issues, advice, information that you'd like to be part of next week's class, go ahead and put them in the comments of this video, and then we'll cover it then. And that'll make sure that we have a lot of content, and I'm addressing exactly what people need to know. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you everybody for joining, whether you came during the live thing or you're going to watch this archive later on Facebook. As we get into next year, as we get into next year, we're going to try to get to some more platforms besides just Facebook, but we're just getting it rolling right now, trying to get some information out there so that all the new people who are gardening right now and the old people keep doing it, reinforcing that with information for your success. So thank you for watching till the end of this one, and I will see you all in the next one. 3 p.m. next Thursday. Be there or be a slug. Something like that. Anyway, I'll see you all later. Thank you for coming. You were there on Sunday to grab some of the items. Awesome. Though I didn't. Oh, you know what? I wasn't. No, I was here Sunday, so I did meet you. All right. Well, next time make a point of going, hey, I'm JJ Sexton. All right, y'all. See y'all in the next one. Bye-bye.